Welcome to TrueCrime Unveiled Podcast. Dive deep into the mysteries that captivate us. If you appreciate this episode, please consider liking and subscribing to support us.
The turquoise waters and white sand beaches of Antigua evoke images of paradise, a haven for the wealthy, a playground for the elite. But beneath this veneer of tropical tranquility lurked a darkness, a meticulously crafted deception orchestrated by one man, Allen Stanford. His name, once synonymous with luxury and success, would become infamous, etched in the annals of financial crime. This is the story of the Stanford International Bank, a story of misplaced trust and devastating betrayal, a story of a Ponzi scheme so audacious it defrauded thousands of investors out of their life savings. We begin, not amidst the opulence of Stanford's Caribbean empire, but in the seemingly mundane world of insurance in Meticulously, Texas, where the seeds of this elaborate fraud were sown.
Allen Stanford's rise was, on the surface, a classic rags-to-riches tale. From humble beginnings, he built a financial empire that spanned the globe. He cultivated an image of respectability, of philanthropy, of unwavering success. He charmed politicians, sponsored sporting events, and hobnobbed with the international elite. This carefully constructed facade of legitimacy was his most potent weapon, allowing him to operate undetected for years. He offered investors above-average returns on certificates of deposit, or CDs, through his offshore bank in Antigua, promising safety and security in a volatile market. These promises, as we will see, were built on nothing but lies.
The allure of high returns with seemingly low risk proved irresistible to many, drawing in investors from all walks of life. Retirees seeking to secure their futures, families hoping to grow their savings, and even sophisticated investors were captivated by Stanford's charm and the promise of financial security. Few questioned the mechanics of the operation, the complexities obscured by a veil of exclusivity, and the reassuring presence of Stanford himself. The bank's operations were shrouded in secrecy, headquartered on a small Caribbean island far from the scrutiny of U.S. regulators. This lack of transparency, while raising some eyebrows, was often dismissed as a necessary component of offshore banking. The stage was set for a financial disaster of epic proportions.
The whispers started subtly. Concerns raised by financial advisors who questioned the consistently high returns offered by Stanford International Bank. These early warnings were largely ignored, dismissed as the envious grumblings of competitors. The regulatory environment at the time, characterized by deregulation and a belief in the self-correcting nature of markets, contributed to a climate of complacency. Few were prepared to challenge the seemingly unstoppable rise of Allen Stanford. But as we delve deeper, we'll uncover the red flags that were missed, the warnings that went unheeded, and the devastating consequences that followed. Less than person one greater than. Before the storm hit, before the idyllic Caribbean facade crumbled, Antigua was a tranquil paradise. Picture this. Sun-drenched beaches, the turquoise waters gently lapping against the shore, the rhythmic sway of palm trees in the warm breeze. Life moved at a slower pace, dictated by the island's natural rhythms. The community of investors drawn to Stanford's bank were largely retirees, seeking a safe haven for their life savings, a place where they could enjoy the fruits of their labor. They were lulled into a sense of security, not just by the stunning surroundings, but by the seemingly rock-solid reputation of the Stanford International Bank. They believed their investments were growing steadily, providing them with a comfortable and secure future in this tropical haven. They trusted Stanford, the man who presented himself as a financial wizard, a pillar of the community, and a friend. They had no reason to suspect the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of this picturesque paradise.
These weren't high-rolling gamblers looking for a quick return. They were ordinary people, many of them elderly, who had worked hard their entire lives. They were looking for stability, a place where their money could grow steadily and safely. Think of the quiet evenings, the clinking of glasses at the local restaurants, the shared stories of grandchildren and retirement dreams. Their lives revolved around the simple pleasures, the kind of tranquility that comes with financial security. They mingled with their neighbors, attended community events sponsored by Stanford, and felt a sense of belonging. They trusted the bank, the reassuring statements they received, the consistent returns that allowed them to maintain their comfortable lifestyle. The island was their sanctuary, and Stanford, with his charismatic personality and promises of financial prosperity, was their shepherd. It's difficult to imagine the devastating blow that awaited them, the shattering of their peaceful existence.
Their days were filled with leisurely activities. Morning walks along the beach, afternoon swims in the crystal-clear waters, evenings spent enjoying the vibrant sunsets. The air was filled with the scent of tropical flowers and the sound of gentle waves. This was their reality, a world away from the hustle and bustle of their former lives. Their investments in Stanford International Bank allowed them to enjoy this lifestyle, to savor each moment, without the worry of financial strain. They were part of a close-knit community, bound together by their shared experience and their trust in Stanford. They believed they had found their piece of paradise, a place where they could live out their golden years in peace and comfort. Little did they know that this idyllic existence was built on a foundation of lies, a house of cards waiting to collapse.
The impact of the scheme wasn't just financial, it was a deep betrayal of trust, a shattering of their peaceful world. Imagine the shock, the disbelief, the dawning realization that everything they had worked for, everything they believed in, was gone. Their sanctuary had been violated, their trust exploited. The vibrant colors of the island seemed to dim, the gentle breezes now carrying a chill of uncertainty and fear. The community that had once been so close-knit was now fractured, each individual grappling with the enormity of their loss, the devastating consequences of Stanford's deception. The paradise they had found had become a prison of anxiety and despair.
Let's rewind a bit and look at the idyllic world Stanford created for himself and his investors. Picture this: the turquoise waters of Antigua, private jets whisking clients to luxurious resorts, a world of cricket matches sponsored by the Stanford International Bank, and a seemingly endless stream of impressive returns on investments. It was an irresistible image, one that drew in thousands of investors, many of whom entrusted their life savings to Stanford's care. They saw him as a financial wizard, a maverick who had cracked the code to wealth creation. He cultivated this persona meticulously, hosting lavish parties, hobnobbing with politicians, and sponsoring prestigious sporting events. It all contributed to an aura of legitimacy, of success that seemed too good to question. This cultivated image was a crucial part of how he managed to operate the scheme for so long, lulling investors into a false sense of security.
It was a carefully constructed facade, wasn't it? Like a stage set designed to distract from the reality unfolding behind the curtains. Investors were invited onto this stage, given a taste of the high life, and reassured by Stanford's confident pronouncements about the stability and security of their investments. He presented himself as a seasoned financier, boasting of his sophisticated investment strategies and the bank's alleged oversight by Antiguan regulators. He even published glossy brochures with pictures of smiling clients and impressive charts illustrating the bank's consistently high returns. All of this created an environment where questioning his methods seemed almost inappropriate, even cynical. He played the role of a benevolent benefactor, promising financial security and delivering, at least initially, what appeared to be exceptional profits. This apparent success silenced any whispers of doubt, allowing the scheme to grow unchecked for years.
However, cracks began to appear in this carefully constructed illusion. Some financial advisors, wary of Stanford's consistently high returns and the lack of transparency surrounding his investment strategy, started to raise concerns. They questioned how Stanford International Bank could consistently outperform the market, particularly during periods of economic downturn. These whispers, initially dismissed as the grumblings of competitors, slowly began to gain traction. Some investors, prompted by these concerns, or perhaps by a gut feeling that something wasn't right, started to ask questions. They requested more detailed information about the bank's investments and operations. These requests, often met with delays and vague answers, further fueled suspicions. The idyllic image Stanford had so carefully crafted was beginning to tarnish, revealing a darker, more unsettling reality beneath the surface.
Yes, and the whispers grew louder as Stanford's behavior became increasingly erratic. There were stories of lavish spending, impulsive decisions, and a growing paranoia within the company. He began to exert tighter control over information, limiting access to financial records and discouraging employees from speaking with outsiders. He became more reclusive, avoiding public appearances and relying on a small circle of trusted advisors. This shift in behavior, while subtle at first, was noticeable to those closest to him and further fueled speculation that something was amiss. The image of the confident financier began to give way to that of a man desperately trying to maintain control, a man with something to hide. The shadow that had been lurking at the edges of the idyllic picture was starting to encroach, threatening to engulf the entire scene.
Let's delve into the mechanics of Stanford's scheme. It's centered around certificates of deposit, or CDs, issued by Stanford International Bank, based in Antigua. These CDs promise significantly higher returns than those offered by U.S. banks, attracting investors looking for better yields. However, these enticing returns were not based on legitimate investments. Instead, they were fueled by new investor money, the classic hallmark of a Ponzi scheme. Stanford lured investors with a veneer of exclusivity, suggesting they were part of a privileged group accessing unique investment opportunities. This aura of sophistication and secrecy helped to mask the fraudulent nature of the operation. Clients received meticulously crafted statements showing consistent growth, further solidifying the illusion of a thriving, legitimate enterprise.
The scheme's longevity, spanning almost 2 decades, is a testament to Stanford's manipulative tactics and the complex web of deceit he constructed. He cultivated a carefully crafted image of success and philanthropy, sponsoring sporting events and rubbing shoulders with political figures. This created an air of legitimacy and influence, disarming potential skepticism. Furthermore, Stanford International Bank operated outside the purview of U.S. regulators, making it more difficult for authorities to scrutinize its operations. This regulatory loophole was a key factor in allowing the scheme to flourish undetected for so long. The bank's offshore location also added to the allure of exclusivity, making the investment seem even more desirable to some.
The cracks began to appear when financial advisors, noticing the unusually consistent returns from Stanford's CDs, started raising questions. These returns defied market fluctuations, a red flag that something wasn't right. Further investigation revealed a distinct lack of transparency regarding the bank's actual investment portfolio. The promised high-yield investments were largely undocumented, and there was little evidence of legitimate financial activities generating the reported profits. This lack of transparency fueled suspicions and ultimately led to whistleblowers coming forward, triggering the eventual unraveling of the scheme.
The SEC finally launched a formal investigation in 2009. Their investigation quickly uncovered the fraudulent nature of Stanford's operation, revealing that the vast majority of investor funds were not invested as claimed. Instead, the money was used to fund Stanford's lavish lifestyle, including private jets, luxury properties, and a string of failed businesses. A small portion was used to pay earlier investors, maintaining the illusion of returns and attracting new investors to the scheme. This classic Ponzi structure ultimately collapsed under its own weight when the flow of new investor money couldn't keep up with the promised payouts. The SEC's investigation exposed the scheme's devastating impact, with thousands of investors losing their life savings.
The news of Stanford International Bank's closure spread like wildfire. Initially, there was confusion. Investors, many of whom had poured their life savings into these seemingly rock-solid CDs, couldn't comprehend what was happening. Phone lines jammed as people frantically tried to contact their financial advisors, the bank itself, anyone who could offer an explanation, but answers were scarce, and the growing silence from Stanford's offices only amplified the mounting fear. Then came the chilling realization: the promised high returns, the aura of stability, the reassuring words of Allen Stanford himself. It was all a carefully constructed illusion. The realization that their investments were likely gone, vanished into thin air, began to sink in. The story started trickling in, whispers at first, then full-blown accounts of ruined retirements, shattered dreams, and lives irrevocably altered. The scope of the deception was starting to become horrifyingly clear.
The atmosphere was thick with anxiety and disbelief. Investors who had once praised Stanford's financial acumen now felt betrayed and foolish. Support groups began to form, both online and in person, as victims sought solace and shared their stories of loss. Many had invested based on recommendations from trusted advisors, adding another layer of complexity to the emotional fallout. Some had even mortgaged their homes or taken out loans to invest with Stanford, believing they were securing their financial future. Now they faced the prospect of losing everything. The impact extended beyond individual investors. Charitable organizations, businesses, and entire communities that had relied on Stanford's supposed prosperity were now teetering on the brink of financial ruin. The scale of the devastation was truly staggering.
The initial shock quickly gave way to anger and demands for justice. Protests erupted outside Stanford's offices and the offices of regulatory bodies. Questions arose about how such a massive fraud could have gone undetected for so long. Fingers were pointed at the Securities and Exchange Commission, accusing them of negligence and oversight failures. The calls for a thorough investigation grew louder and more insistent. The legal machinery began to grind into motion, slowly but inexorably, as investigators started piecing together the complex web of deceit that Stanford had woven. The sheer complexity of the scheme, involving offshore accounts, shell companies, and a network of complicit individuals, made the task daunting, but the pursuit of justice had begun.
The unfolding events left an indelible mark on the financial landscape. The Stanford case became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed and the importance of due diligence. It underscored the vulnerabilities of the financial system and the devastating consequences of regulatory failures. The victims of Stanford's scheme faced a long and arduous road to recovery, many never fully regaining what they had lost. The story of Allen Stanford and his empire of illusion served as a chilling testament to the human capacity for deception and the profound impact of financial fraud on individuals, families, and communities. The echoes of this massive Ponzi scheme continue to resonate within the financial world, a constant reminder of the need for vigilance and transparency.
Stanford presented himself as a successful, self-made billionaire, a financial guru, and a philanthropist. He cultivated an image of respectability, sponsoring prestigious sporting events like cricket tournaments and hobnobbing with politicians. He even received a knighthood from Antigua and Barbuda, further bolstering his image of legitimacy. However, beneath this veneer of success and respectability lurked a ruthless con man. He exploited the trust of thousands of investors, many of whom were retirees looking for safe and stable investments. He used their money to fund his lavish lifestyle, including private jets, multiple homes, and a penchant for extravagant parties. This contradiction between his public persona and his private actions is a key element in understanding the psychology of Allen Stanford.
It's a classic case of a narcissist, someone with an inflated sense of self-importance and a deep need for admiration. Stanford's actions demonstrate a lack of empathy for his victims and a disregard for the consequences of his actions. He believed he was above the law, entitled to use other people's money as his own. He manipulated and charmed his way into the confidence of investors, all the while knowing that his empire was built on lies. This calculated deception reveals a manipulative and predatory personality, driven by greed and a desire for power. His knighthood, his philanthropy, all of it served as a smokescreen to hide his true nature and maintain the illusion of success. It's chilling to consider the depth of his deceit.
The scale of the Stanford Ponzi scheme is staggering. It spanned 2 decades and impacted over 18,000 investors from 113 countries. The estimated losses totaled over $7 billion. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. It was a meticulously planned and executed operation. Stanford surrounded himself with a network of enablers who helped perpetuate the fraud. He created an elaborate web of offshore banks and shell companies to conceal the movement of funds and obscure the true nature of his investments. This level of sophistication suggests a highly organized and calculating mind, not just someone driven by greed, but also by a desire for control and a belief in his own invincibility.
And consider his demeanor throughout the investigation and trial. He maintained an air of defiance, even arrogance. He consistently denied any wrongdoing, claiming that he was a victim of a government conspiracy. He portrayed himself as a misunderstood businessman, rather than the perpetrator of one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history. This lack of remorse and refusal to accept responsibility further reinforces the narcissistic traits we discussed earlier. It underscores the profound disconnect between his public persona and the reality of his criminal actions. He seemed genuinely unable to grasp the devastation he caused in the lives of so many innocent people.
Let's delve into the investigative process in the Stanford case. It was a complex web, spanning multiple jurisdictions and involving a staggering number of victims. Investigators faced the daunting task of piecing together the intricate financial transactions, tracing the flow of money through shell companies and offshore accounts. One crucial aspect was analyzing the communication records within Stanford International Bank. Emails, internal memos, and phone logs became vital pieces of the puzzle, revealing the inner workings of the scheme and the roles played by key figures. However, language barriers and the sheer volume of data presented significant challenges. Initially, investigators focused heavily on Stanford's inner circle, trying to establish a clear hierarchy of responsibility and identify who knew what and when.
The investigation was further complicated by the deliberate efforts to conceal the fraud. Stanford and his accomplices employed various tactics to mislead investors and regulators. False financial statements, fabricated investment reports, and aggressive marketing campaigns created an illusion of legitimacy. Investigators had to meticulously dissect these documents, comparing them with actual transactions and uncovering discrepancies. Another challenge was the international scope of the scheme. Money was moved across borders, making it difficult to track and recover assets. Cooperation with international authorities was essential, but the process was often slow and cumbersome due to differing legal systems and bureaucratic hurdles. This complexity contributed to the length of the investigation and the difficulty in bringing all those responsible to justice.
One of the most frustrating aspects for investigators was the constant stream of missed leads and dead ends. Early on, there were whispers and rumors about irregularities within Stanford's operations. Some investors raised concerns, but their warnings were dismissed or ignored. Regulatory agencies received complaints, but initial inquiries failed to uncover the full extent of the fraud. These missed opportunities allowed the scheme to continue for years, resulting in even greater losses for the victims. It's a stark reminder of the importance of thorough investigation and regulatory oversight in the financial industry.
Adding to the complexity were instances of taunting communications from Stanford himself. Even as the investigation intensified, he maintained a facade of innocence, publicly proclaiming his victimhood. He issued statements through his lawyers, denouncing the investigation as a witch hunt and accusing authorities of unfairly targeting him. This blatant disregard for the suffering he caused further fueled the investigators' determination to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, victims clung to false hope, desperately wanting to believe that their investments were safe. Stanford's charisma and carefully crafted image had instilled a sense of trust, making it difficult for many to accept the reality of the situation. This created a challenging environment for investigators, who had to balance the need for thoroughness with the emotional needs of the victims.
The scale of Stanford's deception is truly staggering. We've established the mechanics of the Ponzi scheme, the fabricated high-yield certificates of deposit, and the luxurious lifestyle Stanford maintained using investor funds. But what about the human cost? Thousands of investors, many of whom were retirees, lost their life savings. Families watched their financial security evaporate, leaving them in precarious positions, facing anxieties about basic necessities like housing, healthcare, and education. The impact rippled through communities, eroding trust in financial institutions and leaving lasting economic scars. Many victims spoke of feeling betrayed not only by Stanford, but by the regulatory systems that failed to prevent the fraud. This wasn't just a financial crime. It was a devastating blow to people's sense of security and their faith in the system.
Absolutely. The emotional toll of this scheme is often overlooked when discussing white-collar crime. Imagine the sense of violation, the realization that your careful planning, your years of hard work have been wiped out by a single individual's greed. Many victims were nearing retirement, anticipating a comfortable future, only to find themselves thrust into financial insecurity. This wasn't simply a matter of lost investments. It was the loss of dreams, of stability, of the future they had envisioned. The psychological impact of this kind of betrayal can be profound and long-lasting, leading to anxiety, depression, and a deep sense of mistrust. For some, the shame and embarrassment associated with being a victim further compounded their suffering.
The long-term consequences extended beyond individual victims. Entire communities, particularly those where Stanford's banks were prominent, suffered economic setbacks. Businesses dependent on the spending power of these investors struggled, and local economies contracted. This created a ripple effect, impacting jobs, property values, and community morale. The Stanford case serves as a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of financial systems and the far-reaching consequences of financial malfeasance. It's not just numbers on a balance sheet, it's real people, real families, real communities, devastated by the actions of one man and the systems that enabled him.
Beyond the immediate financial losses, there's a lingering sense of unease, a pervasive distrust that permeates the lives of victims. Many have expressed a reluctance to re-engage with the financial system, fearing a repeat of their experience. They struggled to rebuild their financial lives, haunted by the knowledge that their trust was so profoundly violated. This enduring trauma is a significant aspect of the Stanford case, a testament to the deep and lasting impact of financial fraud on individuals, families, and entire communities. The recovery process, both financially and emotionally, is a long and arduous journey for many, highlighting the need for greater vigilance and accountability within the financial industry.
The meticulously constructed facade Stanford had built began to crumble under the weight of its own deceit. By 2009, the SEC, after receiving a tip-off years prior that had initially been dismissed, began a formal investigation. They subpoenaed Stanford and his associates, demanding access to financial records that had been consistently obscured. The pressure mounted. Stanford's attempts to appease investors with promises and fabricated documents only fueled the suspicion. His carefully crafted narrative, the one of exclusive, high-yield certificates of deposit in a stable offshore bank, started to unravel thread by thread as investigators pulled at the loose ends. The sheer scale of the deception was becoming apparent, revealing a web of interconnected shell companies and dubious transactions designed to conceal the truth. The once revered financier was now under the intense scrutiny of federal authorities, his empire on the brink of collapse.
The walls were closing in. Stanford's legal teams scrambled, employing delaying tactics and fighting the SEC's subpoenas, but the momentum had shifted. Investigators began piecing together the complex puzzle of Stanford's financial dealings. They discovered that the promised high returns were not the product of astute investment strategies, but were, in fact, sustained by new investor funds, the classic hallmark of a Ponzi scheme. The Antigua-based Stanford International Bank, the supposed cornerstone of Stanford's financial empire, was revealed to be a hollow shell, its assets grossly inflated and its operations shrouded in secrecy. The luxurious lifestyle, the private jets, the knighthood, all of it was built on a foundation of lies, sustained by the misplaced trust of thousands of investors.
The inevitable finally occurred. On February 17, 2009, the SEC filed a civil complaint against Allen Stanford, 2 of his top executives, and 3 of his companies. The complaint charged them with fraud, alleging that Stanford had orchestrated a massive Ponzi scheme, defrauding investors of billions of dollars. The news set shockwaves through the financial world and devastated the lives of countless individuals who had entrusted their savings to Stanford. The SEC moved swiftly to freeze the assets of Stanford and his companies, aiming to mitigate the damage and preserve any remaining funds for potential recovery by the victims.
The arrest followed soon after the SEC complaint. Federal agents located Stanford in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Although initially claiming to be unaware of any charges, he was taken into custody without incident. The image of the once powerful financier, stripped of his veneer of success and facing the consequences of his actions, became a stark symbol of the devastating impact of financial fraud. His arrest marked the beginning of the long legal process, a process that would ultimately expose the full extent of his crimes and bring a measure of justice to those he had defrauded. The case became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed and the importance of due diligence in financial matters.
It's chilling, isn't it? We've spent hours dissecting Stanford's scheme, the meticulously crafted illusion of legitimacy, the blatant disregard for the lives he was destroying. He built an empire on deceit, using cricket sponsorships and a veneer of respectability to mask his predatory actions. He targeted ordinary people, retirees who entrusted him with their life savings, believing in the promise of secure returns. And for what? To fund his lavish lifestyle, his private jets, his opulent homes, his ego. It's almost incomprehensible how one man could orchestrate such widespread devastation, all the while maintaining this facade of benevolent success. He operated in plain sight, manipulating not only his victims, but also regulatory bodies and financial institutions. The scale of the deception is truly staggering.
Absolutely. The Stanford case serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed and the vulnerabilities of our financial systems. He exploited the inherent trust people place in financial advisors, preying on their desire for a secure future. The fact that he managed to operate this scheme for so long, despite numerous red flags, raises serious questions about the efficacy of regulatory oversight. We've seen how easily investors can be swayed by charismatic figures, promises of high returns, and the illusion of exclusivity. The Stanford case highlights the crucial importance of due diligence, critical thinking, and skepticism, especially when dealing with complex financial products. It's a cautionary tale that underscores the need for constant vigilance and robust regulatory frameworks.
And what's even more disturbing is the lasting impact this has had on the victims. Many lost everything: their homes, their retirement funds, their sense of security. The emotional toll of such betrayal is immense. They placed their trust in a system that ultimately failed them. It's a tragic testament to the human cost of financial fraud, a cost that often goes beyond the monetary losses. These are real people whose lives were irrevocably altered by Stanford's greed. The ripple effect of his actions continues to be felt, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of white-collar crime.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other Stanfords are out there, operating in the shadows, weaving webs of deception? How many more fortunes are built on lies, waiting to crumble, leaving devastation in their wake? The complexity of modern finance, coupled with the human capacity for greed and manipulation, creates a fertile ground for such schemes. We can analyze the past, learn from the mistakes, strengthen our regulatory systems. But can we ever truly eradicate the potential for such profound betrayal? The question lingers, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide beneath the surface of apparent prosperity.
Thank you for walking with us through the shadows. The story doesn't end here. It lingers, echoing through time, reminding us that the darkest truths often hide in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant.
This case remains unsolved. Perhaps the truth is still out there,